All right, thanks everybody for joining our webinar today on Reactive IT. My name is Joel Sosby. I'm the Director of Client Success for AtNet Services. We are a managed IT solution provider in the Southeast, and we work with small and medium businesses. And we want to specifically zero in on reactive IT today because when we meet with business leaders each week, we hear two things from them consistently that are problematic within their business. The IT relationships that they have are too reactive. And again, that's whether they have an internal team or whether they're partnering with an external organization. They're too reactive in nature, and there's no real strategy that's being delivered in their business. So those are the reasons why we wanted to focus in on this today and the alternative to a reactive based IT model in your business. So a couple little housekeeping items before we get going. So if you could mute yourself for the duration of the call, feel free to submit any questions in chat along the way. We'll get to those at the end. And then you can unmute yourself and come on live if you've got any questions that way. All right, here's our agenda for today. So we're going to go through what the problem is at large with reactive IT, what problems that causes within the organization, and then zeroing in on some of the hidden costs, the things that not everybody thinks about when it comes to reactivity and what that represents in your organization, what a proactive IT difference could look like, what it looks like, how the proactive process is delivered specifically by the model that we've designed, some of the results that you can expect in your business from a different approach, how you can practically get started along these lines, and then last but certainly not least, give you a chance to ask some questions. All right, so let's talk about the first thing, and this is something that we talk about very often in our business is something called ticket tennis, but literally it's that endless back and forth between users and support. This is something, again, that we hear from people that we talk with prospective clients is just, that routine. We call it even the reactive spiral of death in our business because it doesn't lend itself to anything that's valuable for the business overall, except for a particular user at any given point in time getting support, but nothing really changes. Reactive IT results in unplanned downtime for the organization, disrupting revenue, product and or service delivery, depending on your business. And those things can be very, very costly. And we'll talk about some of those costs in a minute. Lack of standards leads to inconsistent results. We'll talk about what the alternative to that is. Firefighting, preventing any kind of strategic improvement in the organization. If you're fighting fires, you're definitely not being strategic. Reactivity increases risk to cyber attacks. That's one of the things that if you're not specifically thinking about it or you have a partner that's helping you think through those things, you're not thinking about reactivity in those terms. But it really increases the likelihood and the probability that you'll have a cyber attack, and it will be more devastating in your business if you have a reactive model. Let's talk about some of the hidden costs. Lost productivity across the workforce is probably number one. I mean, you think about your largest expense in your budget is your people. And so, lost productivity is something that happens when you have a reactive service model, which is very costly for a business. Delayed projects and missed deadlines can result from reactivity and things that don't work as they should. Lower overall customer satisfaction scores in your business. And something that we've heard from people that we've met with is having turnover within their business. And not all of the calls, but some of the calls was technology not working well in their organization. If they can't do their job, they're going to have more and more frustrations and potentially lead to some turnover. Long-term costs are very high in this type model based on patchwork fixes is what I've got there, but any kind of Band-Aid and treating symptoms versus getting to the root cause of an issue. And over the last 5 years, as cyber events have gone up, we get calls routinely for incident response from people who aren't even our clients, but people will call in and ask us to help them through cyber events in their business. And there's two things that we know from dealing with each one of those things. One, they're far more costly than any organization thinks at the time when you consider forensics and legal and lost productivity and potential loss of clients. All those things are very, very costly for an organization. And regardless of what type of business you're in or the business plans that you've set for your business for this year, it has the potential of derailing those business plans. So let's talk about the alternative to that. Because there is an alternative. We've been successfully delivering on this model we're approaching 14 years in it. But let's talk about what proactivity would look like in your business. The graphic that I've got there is more the care and feeding versus the firefighting model. But what that represents in your organization is an alignment of the technology to standards. We'll talk about specifically how we deliver that, but standardizing the technology that you own and employ within your organization. If you think about back to what I said a minute ago, the overall cost of having reactivity in your organization is inconsistent results. Getting consistent results when you standardize the technology is the alternative to that. A dedicated resource that's focused on proactive maintenance and optimization. Again, we'll talk about how we deliver that. Eliminating those recurring issues before they have an impact on the business. Proactivity will allow you to do that because you're focused on the underlying root causes versus those symptoms. Predictable performance and outcomes is the benefit of standardization as well as proactivity as a part of that. Just making sure that we do have a predictable outcome for the way that technology should be run. Freeing up your team to focus on those core business activities, the reason why you hired them in the first place, not to manage your technology, but to do their particular task and carry out your mission. And then a proactive approach lends itself to a plan for cybersecurity and the journey that is, and then also not if something happens in your business, but when something happens in your business along the way of cyber, having an effective plan that your team can socialize and who's doing what and how that will work according to the way that you need it handled. So let's talk about our proactive process. And I'm going to go through, this will be just some verbiage on the screen, and then I've got a graphic to support that. But I just want to give you an idea of how we approach this. One is you can't deliver proactivity if you don't have someone dedicated for proactivity. You think about in your organization, if you want something within your organization you want to move the needle on either a new product, a new service, a different way of doing things within your business, you would hire somebody to stand over that. They would have metrics for success and then also accountability. The same is true in this case with proactivity. You can't do that from reactive based service technicians. We have a process called the standardization and alignment of technology. So we align the standards, so the technology that you have against industry best practices, our years of experience since 1999, and then largely based on security frameworks. Even if you're not subject to compliance, there's still standards that organizations ought to adhere to drive down risk. All those things are measured on an ongoing basis and aligned to those standards so that we can build a process for how we can help your organization get better. And so those continuous reviews are important in order to do that. The implementation of baseline security controls. Baseline security controls are necessary to drive down a lot of the risk, but when we see other organizations out there and how they're doing cybersecurity, almost everybody we talk to says that they're fine when it comes to their cyber risk. But when we pull back the curtains and we sort of look at what's going on under the surface, there's some tools. And even though the tools have been upgraded, tools are 25% of what you need when it comes to cyber. So, you need baseline security controls. And only a portion of those are products. The rest is people and process. And that's what helps you reduce that risk for cyber attacks. If everybody was fine, a small and medium business wouldn't be compromised every 39 seconds. Once those security controls and those baselines are implemented, then we can pivot to a continuous monitoring for anomalous activity on systems at large. What looks like a threat and alerting on that threat so we can take immediate action. Again, think that the early detection is what we want to put in place so we can minimize the impact to the organization. That's what we're talking about here. And then having a dedicated In our business, we call it a chief strategy officer or a strategy officer that's dedicated to providing that element of strategy. So when we hear business leaders saying there's no strategy, it's typically because whatever they're doing, again, whether it's an internal process for IT or external, there's no one that's standing over providing thought leadership to the organization that's focused on those business outcomes that are necessary. And with that strategic planning, we're able to build a technology roadmap to align the technology that you run today, the technology as it changes over the course of time with those business goals to make sure the technology is right sized, but it's also optimized and that new and emerging technologies are considered when it comes to your business goals. So this is what that looks like graphically. So these are all the functional areas, save for professional services, and everybody would have some element of delivering projects in business. But if you look at the bottom diamonds there on the reactive side, again, functional areas that we also have in our business, but the centralized services down here really represents delivering tools, standing over those tools, making sure that they're operating the way that they should be in the organization. And then you've got sort of the backstop over here of a service desk. So not unlike anybody else. I mean, we want to make sure that when our clients have issues that we've got great support for them to back them up. But what's moving the needle forward on businesses are these proactive elements that I've outlined on the slide before. And you notice these are a different color, and that's really to indicate that they don't get involved with these reactive things down here. So the alignment, we're focused on aligning the technology to standards. Our managed cybersecurity team is implementing the framework that's based on the chief strategy officer when he's talking to clients and assessing their level of risk for the technologies that they operate and based on the current tactics, techniques, and procedures of the threat actors. And then we have a separate team that can implement those changes and manage those things on an ongoing basis. So results of proactive IT. This is a really, really big one when you think about, I mean, just back to what I mentioned a minute ago, on the decrease in overall efficiency of your workforce. A proactive approach, you get rid of those reactive issues that are super consistent and not diagnosed at a root cause level. You see a significant increase in workforce productivity. That might not be 30% in your case, but we've seen up to a 30% increase in workforce productivity, significant reduction in downtime. Again, when you're proactive, you can plan around things. You can put contingencies in place. And don't just think cyber when you think downtime. There's lots of things that can introduce risk for downtime in an organization. And those are all things that we help our clients manage. Any kind of downtime is costly for the provider that you're using. So us or someone else, an internal team, and your organization at large. And so you want to minimize those downtime events. Better cost predictability for IT expenses. So when you have proactivity, you have a strategic plan, you have an IT roadmap, all those expenses, anything that needs to change, investments that you need to make in your organization that are going to have a financial impact, those are identified, put on the roadmap so that you can budget and plan for those type things. Things that come up in your business that are unplanned. I mean, because you've dealt with them before in a variety of ways in your business. I'm sure they're always the most costly and you have to make quick decisions you're not necessarily prepared for. So we want to help to prepare organizations for those type things. Higher employee satisfaction with IT. I mean, if you think about the way we all do business nowadays, we're all very technology dependent. The technology needs to work so we can do our job day to day, which will lead to higher employee satisfaction. Overall, it should yield a better quality customer experience when the technology works right. As I mentioned a minute ago, you've got a mission in your business. You're delivering a product or a service, and you want that to be a quality experience for your customers. Technology is an enabler to help you do that. And then reducing risk for cyber attacks by up to 95%. We know that that's mathematically possible because of the security controls that we put in place. You can't get to 100, and you can't get to 100 is because there's always some reason that the technology will fail, and that's why the early detection of minimized impact is really, really critical in there. So let's talk about how you would get started. And it really starts by assessing your current IT relationship. So just think for a second about how things work day to day from an IT perspective. So if you're in a leadership role, what do you consistently hear from your teammates? Is everything going great? Is there room for improvement? Are you consistently hearing about the same kind of things? Are issues going unresolved for long periods of time? That's a good indication that things are reactive in your business when it comes to technology and technology management. Do you meet with someone other than an engineer or an account rep regularly? You should. People that you're working with should have somebody who's, again, not an engineer pulled off a service desk or an account rep. And we have account reps in our business, and they do a great job, but we don't put them in charge of thought leadership. That's not what we want them to do, and help an organization strategically plan for things. How well does your current partner know your business? Do they educate you on current technologies and things to consider in your business? If the answer to the previous question was no, probably a good reason why they're not educating you on those current technologies. But a valuable partnership should be giving you things to consider in your business that could potentially help, not just trying to sell you things, but to get you to think about doing things in a different way. How well is your team prepared to deal with a cyber event? This is a really good indication of whether you're in pretty good shape when it comes to cyber, or you've got a long way to go. I mean, if you've got a plan, that would be the first part. If you've got what we call an incident response plan, but something that would have a series of assignments for teammates and process that you would undergo in your organization if and when something happens on the cyber side. It's sort of a process. You think about back to the elementary fire drill that we were all subject to, same kind of thing. I mean, what would you do, not if, but when something happens, and can you follow along those set of instructions and processes? And if you don't have that, then you're likely not doing tabletops routinely to figure out what that would look like and make sure that you've got everything planned for. And we'd be remiss if we didn't ask, after you evaluate the relationships that you've got right now, do you need a better IT partner? Is that where you are right now? Is now the appropriate time to consider doing something different? All right. And at this time, I'll open it up to any kind of questions that you all have. And Austin, I don't know if we've got any submitted via the chat, but if anybody wants to ask any questions, happy to answer any questions for you that I can.
Yeah, we do have one from chat.
Okay.
The question is when you are evaluating a change, how do you discern between a reactive vendor and the strategic partner model that you were talking about?
How do you evaluate it?
Yeah,
Or
how would you discern, when you're looking at making a change and you're meeting with somebody, um, what would you look at to determine whether they're going to be a reactive partner or a strategic partner?
Well, I would look at how many dedicated resources they have for proactivity. That's probably the first place to start. How many people outside of that model that I showed you graphically there, or showed everybody graphically. I mean, if everybody's in that reactive space, you can't really expect better results. I mean, there needs to be a dedicated person that's in charge of just carrying out that mission on the proactivity side. And so that'd be a good place to start. And I've given people practical ways to kind of evaluate what they're doing right now. But yeah, that's what I would do. I mean, specifically, how do you deliver proactivity would be a question that I would ask any prospective partner. I mean, how are you delivering that? How have you done that successfully? What's the model like? How long have you been doing it? I mean, those are some questions that you can sort of ask them and get a sense for if it's good intentions, because good intentions won't get you there. I mean, we've seen that. I mean, very rarely do you see somebody change their business model, which is what would be required if you don't have something like this in place. Good question, though. Any other questions?
Yeah, so I got a couple more here.
Okay.
As far as cost goes, does proactive IT, does it cost more than traditional support?
I'd say overall the answer is no, just because of all the costs, like we went through some of the hidden costs. Typically on your line item as a budget, if you just look at IT and what you're spending on it, and people typically zero in on the what I'm paying a managed service provider, what I'm paying Microsoft, all those things. A relationship like this is very, very different from your traditional reactive service model. So I would say sometimes, because when we're talking to people, I mean, what we're trying to evaluate is, do you need better results? Would you be willing to invest a little bit more money if that were required? And is now the right time to make a change? Those are the three questions that we are sort of trying to figure out when we're meeting somebody for the first time. And so in that, a lot of times we do tell people, hey, look, this might be a little bit more expensive. In the long term, it's significantly less expensive when you think about all those soft costs and you think about the implication that poor technology and poor technology management has on your mission at large and on your clients. It's significantly less expensive. Good question.
Okay, well, along those same lines, then if you're making the change to proactive IT, how quickly can you expect to see the results you're talking about?
Well, I think you can see results in as little as 30 days. I don't think you're at the point where you've recognized or realized all the change at that point. But one of the things that we do when we're going through the onboarding process with a new client is we're really looking for what are those recurring issues that you've been dealing with for 12 months or more. And the things that, again, your team is frustrated with daily. And we have a process for taking down those things to start with. So if we can eliminate a lot of those things that are causing reactivity and begin to focus on some of the other elements, over that 60 to 90-day period, things really, really settle down dramatically, but people see results in as little as 30 days for sure. Good question.
The last one I've got here is if you're looking to make a change to going to proactive IT services, what's the first step to take?
Well, I think I would start with sort of the last thing that I laid out with, do you need a change? I mean, not everybody that we meet with needs a change. Not everybody out there is doing a bad job. We know that the vast majority of people are set up to deliver on the reactive model. We're in a peer group that's nationwide. And within that, we talk about what they're seeing in their markets. And we know as many as 95% of people are simply delivering on this. It's really a 12 to 15-year-old IT services model. But consider some of those things, and that'll really expose if you've got things that you need to consider. And so the next step would be, and we make this very easy for people, it's just a conversation. It's let's sit down and talk about, what you're thinking about the IT services that you're receiving, how your technology is today, what if anything needs to change going forward, and we evaluate whether or not a change would help you in those areas, whether potentially a change to us would help you in those areas. And then last but certainly not least, does it make sense? I mean, based on the things that you've got to take down with your business goals for this year, is now the right time to make a change? And if all those things kind of line up, then we talk about what that would look like and help them have a sense for what it's going to look like when we take over support and what it looks like as we work with them strategically and proactively in some of those areas that I've outlined. So yeah, it just starts with a simple conversation. We normally ask people that we're talking to, prospects, 15 or 20 minutes just to kind of gauge, what makes sense to have another conversation. So that's the way we lay it out. Good question. Any other questions?
That's all I've got.
Okay. All right. Good deal. And I put my contact information up there. So feel free if there's something that you have a question about that we covered today, but maybe didn't get to, and you've got questions that you didn't get a chance to ask, or you've got a teammate that watches the recording of this and they've got questions, feel free to reach out to me. Happy to field any questions or have a conversation at your convenience. But otherwise, appreciate everybody for joining our webinar. We're going to do these monthly, so hope to see you on a future webinar. Thanks again. Have a great day.